Hey guys, so I'm gonna be going over chapter 10, files and exceptions. And as with some of my previous videos, I'm gonna post the link to my GitHub in the description here. And so what you can do is you can just follow that link to my GitHub. That way you can copy the code that we're gonna be utilizing for this. So you can see I have the code here, and I'm just going to paste that there. We're also going to be going through this in sections, so you'll see me say, okay, let's grab a code from section 1 here. We'll just grab that section 1, paste it in. If you have the Python Crash Course book, that's great because that's going to be very helpful for you to follow along, as I'm just pretty much giving you the answers to some of the questions there, some of the challenges, as well as just walking you through some of the basics of files and exceptions. If you don't have the book, that's fine. You can still follow along with the video and learn something from it. So for example, if I were to click on this link, it would take you to my GitHub. And yeah, so you would just, in the upper right hand corner, you'll see copy raw content. If you click that, it'll copy it all to your clipboard. So that way you can just paste it into your Sublime text editor. If you don't have Sublime text editor, there's a previous video where I show you how to install it back in the other sections. So I'd recommend you go there, install it, then come back here. But let's go and get started with this. Okay guys, so here we're going to be doing chapter 10, files and exceptions. So when will you use files and exceptions? You usually utilize files and exceptions if you're creating a program that allows people to save the content of the work or open up a file and read the content of the file. Another reason you would use exceptions, let's say you're trying to make a resilient program that will run in the case the user's prompt with an error. Okay, chapter 10, file and exceptions. So why or when would you use file and exceptions? So let's say you're trying to create an app and you want to allow the users to be able to save their work or open up a file. Um, and another reason you would use exceptions would be if you're trying to make a resilient program that will prompt the user for an error or prompt the user in the case that they've entered their data incorrectly. So that's a good reason why you'd use it. Now, carrying on, moving forward, we're going to be using with open and then the path to the file here. Now you can see that I have a double backslash, and you have to put the double backslash, otherwise Python will not recognize that path and you will have issues along the way. So just remember that you have to do that. And this is just an example of a program that would open up a text file and then read the contents of that text file and then print the contents to the screen. Now that's great. Let's go ahead and take section 1 here. So you'll take the start and the end. And what you're going to do is you're just going to copy it. You're just going to paste it here to your Sublime text editor. Then we're going to click Control B, and you can see that what it's done is it has the import OS. You don't need to put that, but when I was first going through this, I just wanted to make sure that my code worked with Windows, so I just put import on OS. And then here you can see we have a variable that stores the path to the file. Of course, we have the double backslash there, so Python recognizes this as a path. And we're going to, with open file path, which is the variable that stores the path as file. Now, from here on out, we're basically assigning that file to an object named file. Okay. And next what we're going to do is we're going to reference that object we've created, file, dot, and we're passing it to the read method. So method takes input and processes it, and then you have output. Okay, so within coding, you have methods that are pre-made, and In this case, we have one that is for reading the file. So all we need to do is this specify the object. In this case, it's file, and we want to read that object, right? Which is in this case is a text file. Okay, and then what we're going to do is we're going to store whatever we read into a variable called contents. And then we're going to print the contents to the screen. So we're essentially just opening up that text file, reading through it, assigning those values to a variable, and then printing that variable to the screen. So that's what you see here. And so we are able to see what is in the test.txt. Next, we're going to take this section 2. I'm going to copy that. We're just going to paste it in here. And we're going to be reading line by line. So we can have a file, but let's say the file has multiple lines in it. It's not just one liner. So what we're going to do is we're going to basically do the same thing. So we have our object file, right? And it says for line in file. So for each line in the file, print each line, right? So here we're opening the file, and then for each line in the file, print the line. So when we click Control B, we can see the same thing, except in this case, you notice that it's printing each individual line there. And you can see that there's a space in between them. So we need to fix the space so that way all of the data isn't spaced out like that. Now, the way we could remove the space is we could basically go through the same process. So for line in file, print line, so each line, and then you see the right strip, the R strip. So we're passing it to the right strip method that's going to strip that space basically. So if we click Control B, you can see it's stripped that space, and we no longer have the space. So as we go through these challenges, you'll notice that I'm going to, in some cases like this, we have the file path assigned to the file path variable with open file path, and then we're specifying the path to the file we want to open. Open is another kind of like a method, and as file. So then we're assigning that object the name file, and then file dot read lines here. So we're reading each line, and then we're printing that into a, or actually, whatever it reads, it's going to then send that into this variable lines. And so as we go through the challenges, you're going to notice that I'm going to be taking the file content and typically putting into a variable, because then we could work with that variable a lot easier. So for line in lines, so it's going to go through that line's variable, and for each line, it's going to print each line. It's going to R strip so we don't have spaces. So if I click Control B, you'll see it produces the same output. Okay, so that was section 4. We're going to go ahead and move over to section 5 here. All right. Okay, so working with file contents. So as you've seen earlier, what we did was we had to go line by line within the code and do like an R strip to remove extra spaces. So what we can do is we could kind of like filter our data in a sense if we essentially we do the same thing with open file as files, the object read lines, and then assign that to a variable called line. And then for line in lines, it's going to then add each one of those lines with the R strip. So we're kind of like ensuring that the data that we're inputting into our variable is the way we want it, right? We're not just taking line in this case, which would have those spaces, and working with that. We may want to, in this case, add the R strip so that it strips out those spaces, and then we add it to a variable called PyString. Or maybe you add it to PyString. What if it's a number? You may want to make sure that we've taken that data or that content and make sure that we initialize it so that it's seeing that data is a integer or something of that sort, right? So we're just making sure that the data we put in the variables is the way we want it to be, okay? So this is how we want it to be, and that's what we're gonna get. When we put it into PyStream, we're gonna get it the way we want to with rstrip, so it's gonna remove those extra lines. Then we can print the PyString, right? So we format it the way we want it to be. Now we can print that. And what we can also do is we can send it to like the length method here. It's just going to essentially just print out the length of that file. So however many characters you have in there, it's going to print the length of that. Right. So let's go ahead and click Control B. And it looks like I've run into a little error here. I'm going to fix that real quick. Okay, so it was for line in line, and you can see that this is line, not lines with an S. So if I were to change that to an S there, so it made more sense. Click Control B. Oh, run to another error here. Let me just make sure everything looks good. Oh, here we go. So that's line. This is lines. There we go. So we get the same content. I'm going to make sure that I've corrected this. So by the time you've taken this from GitHub, you're not going to run into the same error. There we go. But as you see here, it's showing the content of the file, and then it is printing out that there's 35 characters within this file. Okay. Okay, when it counts 35 characters, it's including the spaces, it's including the dots. So as we go through this, there's some of the challenges. We're going to have to ensure that by the time we've put the content into a variable like PyString, we format it the way we want it to be so that we don't run into issues like these spaces and such. So let's go ahead and go through that as well. So earlier you've seen that there were some spaces. So the way we can ensure that the content is a format we want it to be is we can essentially we're doing the same thing, right? For line in lines, and what we're doing is we're adding each line with the strip, just the strip method, and that'll remove any spaces. Okay. Then we're going to print whatever's in the variable. Well, should be all the lines, and then we're going to print the length. So here we have 31 after we've removed those spaces. So this is a more accurate count of how many characters there actually are. Okay, now moving on to section 7 here. So we'll just go ahead and click Control B here. And there's a lot going on here. So we have the path of the file, open with file path as the object here, file is the object, dot read lines, and we are going to store that in the lines variable. Then for each line in that lines variable, we're then going to add each line to the PyString variable, and we're going to strip out any spaces. So this PyString variable should have all the contents of that file without any spaces. And then what we're going to do is we're going to print PyString, and you can see it's got the colon 52 bracket curly brace curly bracket, and we got 3 dots there. So the 3 dots, essentially what we're doing is we're saying stop at the 52nd character there, and once it gets up to about 52 characters, it's going to stop and it's going to do the dot dot. Why? Because there's a lot of characters here. Let me see here. There's about almost like a million. So there's like a million characters here. We don't want all of them to take up our entire screen down here. So we're saying, just stop at the 52nd character and just print out what the length of that file is. And so we can see it's almost like 1,000,000. So we obviously don't want that to print to the screen, right? Otherwise, it'll just look like the matrix. We'll just have a bunch of numbers coming down. All right, and number 8. So here we got number 8. We'll just take that, copy, or actually, this is, yep, number 8. All right, so we'll just paste this in here. And then so we have the file path, C, temp, and we have the pi million digits.txt. All right, so the book provides us some resources here. One of those resources is a text file with like 1,000,000 digits. Okay. And so what I've done is I've just saved that file in my C temp pi million digits.txt path. And so I've just made, you know, a file with some digits. If you don't have the book, you can just create a text file and just store it in a folder. Just create a folder called temp, name it pi million digits.txt, and just put a few random numbers in there. And you can follow along with us here. This one has 1,000,000. I'm pretty sure you can Google a site that will have 1,000,000 random numbers that you can also take if you wanted to do that as well. But that's all we really need in this case. So here, what we're going to do is we're going to open the file path as file.readlines, right? Pi strings, so putting all the content there, stripping out spaces, stopping at 52 characters, printing the length. And then here you see something interesting here. We got a birth date. So we're just trying to see is you know, there's 1,000,000 characters here. Do any of our characters follow this specific order here? Because if they do, then if we have a 01, 0011, 775, then that means that someone's birthday is in that file, right? So if birthday in pi string, your birthday appears in the first 1,000,000 digits of the pi file. Else, print your birthday does not appear in the first 1,000,000 digits of the pi file. Now, this is all great because if we run this, you'll see it says your birthday does not appear in the first 1,000,000 digits of the pi file, meaning that within it, if you were to take these numbers, you wouldn't find this exact order of numbers in that pi file. But what if we ran into an issue? What if instead of numbers, those were something else? You know, a data type that Python just doesn't recognize. And so what happens is you would have to be prompted with an error, and that's where exceptions come into play. So as we go through this, you'll learn how we can control what errors the users see. Okay, so moving over to section 9 here, I'm just going to paste that in here. Checking your birthday. So learning C. All right, so we've got the C temp like.txt and with open file path as file object relines, and then we have like strings and replacement. So 4 line inlines, and we're going to strip out any spaces here. And what we're going to do is we have this file here, and if it sees Python, it's going to replace it with C#, right? So that's what we're doing here. Then we're going to add that replaced value here. So we're then going to put that into the file, and then we're going to print out the replaced value there. So strings plus equals line strip. So when we print this out, we should get the following: C# coding hacking. And so what I did was I put Python into that file. So if it's seen Python, it would replace it with the coding language C#, right? So once we replace that, we store that in the change, and then we use the replacement plus the change. So we got this replacement variable here. So we're adding that change to the replacement, and then we're printing the replacement like strings, which is this value here. And we're then adding that to the line, right? And so right there, we have line. So it's the file contents. We're replacing a value within the file. All right, and I'm just gonna make a quick change to this. So changing value in file. All right, great. So number 10 here, write to file. Here we add a second argument, W, to tell Python we want to open the file in write mode. Okay, let's do that. Copy this over here. It'll be so what we've done is we've opened the file with open file path, and then you can see we've specified the W. So we have W for write, we have R for read, and here we're writing to the file. So as file write, I love programming. Okay, so then if we print the contents of that, then we should see what's in the file. So here you can see we have the file path, we write to it, I love programming. Then what we do next is we open it again, except this time we're reading the lines. So we're not writing to it, we're just reading what's in the file, and then we're printing what's in the file. So I love programming. All right, so that's section 10. Let's move to section 11. Just gonna add that code there. So writing multiple lines. So what if we wanted to write multiple lines? Then what we can do is we need to add the \n for new line, or else we'll have to merge a sentence here. So let's go ahead and try writing this. Now you can see it's just written to this write to file.txt. Let me open that file up so you can see it. So here's the file, and you can see I love programming, I love new games. And you can see that's put them on the same line. So that's why we're going to want to write to multiple lines so that it looks like that instead. Okay, so let me go back, don't save, and we'll work on part 12 here. Run this. You'll see that it's saved. I'm going to go ahead and open up that file now. So you can see with the \n for new line, we now have it in the format that we want it to be. So I love programming, new line, I love to create a new game. Now, what if we want to append to a file? We can use the A for append. And what we're going to do is we're going to add some more lines to this file, append to file.txt. So let me go ahead and run this, and then we'll open up that text file. So after opening it, you can see I have my name, Dan. I also love learning Python. I love creating apps. So we've just appended these two values here to the file. All right, so next we got this section 14. It's going to be a challenge, and it's going to prompt the user to enter their name into the guest.txt. and there's a loop that will prompt for their name and print a greeting. Then it appends their name to a greeting book. So what we're gonna have to do is we're just gonna copy this code for section 14. I'm gonna paste it over here. And we're gonna have to actually use Sublime Text, or actually not Sublime, PyCharm. So PyCharm allows us to have an interactive session, which Sublime Text Editor does not. So if you try running this, it will just freeze Sublime and it will not work. But if you utilize PyCharm, which I show you how to install in other videos, then it will work for you. So we'll just go ahead and check to see if I have the actual program for this. 10.3 challenge guest. Okay, let me see if I have that here. Here we go, guest book. So I'm just gonna double click that. It opens it up here, and we have a poll that's gonna ask for the person's name. So while poll is active, so while I'm waiting for input, what is your name? Then it's gonna store that value in the name variable. Then it's gonna repeat. Input is anyone else visiting? If so, enter their name or input no. So if they input no, polling active equals false, so it stops the polling. And then it prints polling results. Thank you for visiting. Your visit has been recorded. And we're going to store their name inside of a file. So what we're going to do is we're going to open file path, the path to the file with open file path. We're going to append their name as to file to the object that we've created, file, the object file dot write, and then we're going to input their name into that file. So let's try running this and see what we get. All right, so we're just going to, what is this one called? Guest book. Okay, guest book. So let's try running guest book here. Click run, and then we should have guest book as an option. And so I'm put Dan the tech. No. Okay, thank you for visiting. Your visit has been recorded, Dan the tech. So what I want to see is I want to see this actual file, append to file. We just opened it a second ago, and if you remember, we were actually adding values to it. Now we've added Dan the tech to it. So if we open it, you see Dan the tech has been added. And this is great for logging, right? So if you have an app and you want to log their name into a file, well, you can do that. All right, so that was challenge 14 there. We'll go ahead and move over to 15, programming poll. And here we're going to ask them, why do you like to program? They're gonna answer something. And we're gonna ask for another response where they can input no, which would exit the program. And where they're gonna store whatever they've typed into the input, repeat here. We're going to then store that into a file path, and we're gonna append it into that file. And we're gonna use the new lines, which we mentioned earlier, if you want it to be in that format where it takes each line and, well, it takes each input and puts it in its own line, right? Rather than having it all squashed together. So let's go ahead and take start 15, run that over here, paste that in. Again, this is going to require that we utilize PyCharm for the interactive capability. So here I have my program poll file. I'm gonna click on it. It's going to then open it. We're going to run it. We're going to poll. Says, do you like to program? Yes. Enter another response or input no to exit. So I'm putting no, because we don't want to enter any more responses. All right. And then it should have logged our responses in the programming poll.txt. So if I go to the programming poll.txt, you'll see I've got quite a few responses in here because it's fun. No, it is fun. IDK, no. Okay, so he. So you can see I've entered quite a few responses as when I was programming this, I ran into some issues. So, I had to do it multiple times to fix it. And that's the answer to that challenge. Now we're gonna move over to exceptions. Handling exceptions such as division errors. So this is a good example of why we would utilize an exception. And I'm giving you guys the answers, but I'm also kind of just walking you through some of the sections here, just because I can give you an answer, you wouldn't understand it unless I walked you through that section a little bit, just to like recap on it. Not so much to teach you exactly what the book taught me. Again, I'd recommend getting the book because it's a great book, and you can learn Python. So let's see here. We have print 5. All right, so what we're doing is we're dividing 5 by 0. So if we do that, we're going to get an error. And what we're going to do next is we're going to catch that error to say you can't divide by 0. So if we take section 17, you'll see that it will prompt the user, you can't divide by 0. And so that's how we're able to control the errors that they see with the try, except. And try, except can't just be utilized in Python, it can be utilized in other languages as well, like PowerShell, where you use try catch instead. But here in Python, we use try except. It's a little different. And that's the great thing about Python is you can take these concepts and go learn other languages as well. So let's take start 18 here, right? And by the way, this exception, it's very helpful because what's going to happen is you're going to want to show someone else your code, and within like 2 seconds, they're going to break it. So you want them to see an error. Maybe they'll break it because they don't know what they're doing. They don't know how to use it. And you can have an error that'll like tell them what to do next. Then they could fix themselves and the program can run like intended. So this is extremely important. You can't just create a program and be like, I'm done. You have to make sure it's error proof. Using exceptions to prevent caches. So earlier, if we tried to divide by 0, we got an error, right? Here, we're actually taking input. So again, we're using PyCharm. So we're taking the first number and we're taking the second number and we're dividing it. But if they input, 0, we should be able to give them an error message. In this case, it won't give them an error message, and the program will crash. It'll freeze up. Let's see what happens, right? So we got error example. All right, so I've input my error example code here. I'm then going to type 5, 0, and we get an error. So, but notice that we get the default error, and then it gives us like the path to the file. And you can see this can be like a security issue now because we've essentially just gave them the name of our variable answer. We've given them a name to a file path, and we've indicated that this application can essentially be crashed if we input some bad information, some bad data, right? So what we want to do is we want to control those errors. So let's go to 19 here. Using exception to prevent crashes. Here we have a try, except, and else, which allows us to catch errors and make our code more resilient to errors. So while true, it's going to ask for the first number. If first number equals quit for the queue, it's going to break. So it's going to break out of the code, and the program's going to stop. Second number input, they're going to input a second number. Also, they could enter queue and it would break, it would exit. Try, Python will try to run this, so it'll try to divide it and then input in an answer variable, except 0 division error. So if there's a 0 division error, right, that we seen earlier, that specific error here for 0 division error, then we're going to want to say you can't divide by 0. Okay. Else, if you're able to determine the answer, you're going to print it. So we'll try running this here. And I should have this code already here. Try accept examples. Yep, here it is. So now I'm just going to run it. All right, try example. Enter the first number, 5, enter second number, 0. You can't divide by 0, so it's more resilient. It will catch those errors. Great. Let's move on to the next section here. Section 20. And we are just breezing through this. This is great. Really like this. I think it only goes up to 30, so you guys are doing a great job of catching up and being able to comprehend this. So, handling the file not error found exception. So here we have a file named alice.txt with open file name encoding UTF-8. So we want to make sure that we're utilizing the specific encoding when we open the file. Then we're going to read the contents of the file in this name. In this case, the object is referenced as f. So f.read, and then it's going to store those contents in the contents variable. And this will error out because the thing is the file doesn't exist. I mean, you can see this path looks nothing like the path we've been using. And so this will not work. This will not work. So what will happen here is they'll try to open a file that's not there and it'll error out. Here we can try to open a file, alice.txt. Try with open file name encoding UTF-8 as file, that's the name of the object, f.read contents, except file not found error. So if we get this specific error, print, sorry, the file, and then the name of the file does not exist. So let's try to run this and see what we get. Oh, okay. What I'll do instead is I'll just comment this bottom code out so that we can see both of these without having to delete everything. Or actually, you know what? Why don't we not do that? We'll just use Control Z to delete it and then bring it back. So I'm gonna just do this, Control C, delete it, actually, sorry. Delete it, and then Control B to run it. And then we get that error saying, hey, this file doesn't exist. File not found error. That's the name of the error. All right, I'm gonna Control Z as in Zulu, and it'll paste back what I deleted. And then Control C this up here, delete it, and then Control B. And then here we also run into an error. What's file name? Do you need file name? Okay, so it looks like I may have an issue with my variable, which I think I deleted that earlier, but yeah. Sorry, the file does not exist. So let me check here and make sure that that variable is there. Yeah, it is. I must have deleted it earlier by accident. But... So this will error out, right? That's what we wanted it to do. We want to accept. Kind of think of this like a catch, right? So if it sees an error, it's going to catch that error and say, sorry, the file does not exist, right? I like how Python does that, and then PowerShell does that. They use catch instead of accept, but accept works very well as well, you know. All right, so let's do section 21 here. Okay, so 21 here, counting words. So we're going to show this to U drive and reading, it shows 32 words. Okay, so what we're doing is we're opening this file and we're going to try with open file encoding UTF-8 as F, which is the file content, and then it's going to store, well, it's going to read the file. So F, read the file, storing the content variable. Now you can see this doesn't really have logic. It's really just opening the file. But in the case the file doesn't exist, then the accept will notice the file not found error and it will print, sorry, the file does not exist. Now the else here is going to be where we want to put the logic, right? So first we're testing to see if the file has been open. If the file if it exists, and if it can be opened and read. And if it can't, then we're going to prompt this error. And if it can, then we're going to perform some type of logic. So we're going to count the approximate number of words in the file. So we have content split, which splits each string, which have a space, separates the words in the string. That way we can count each one of those individually, and then we're going to count the number of words. Then we're going to store that in a words variable, and we're going to say the file name has about X amount of words, right? So if we try this, it will say the file, and then it'll say C temp Alice in Wonderland.txt has about 32 words. So we're able to figure out how many words are actually in that file utilizing this code. All right. So next we'll go ahead and move on to the next one, which is 22. Here we're going to be working with multiple files. So unlike we just did right now, it's just working with one file. Let's go ahead and work with multiple files. So here we create a function that we can easily pass multiple files in. So you can see we're working with a function here, define the function count words, and it's going to count the approximate number of words. So it's essentially the same logic we had earlier, which is going to check to see if file exists, and if it doesn't, it's going to prompt them an error. And the else here is going to split and then count the words and then prompt the user and show them how many words are in that file approximately. And then what we're doing here is we have this other function, define count words, and it's saying Alice in Wonderland, right? Like text. So we have two files here, two text files, basically. And we're able to pass that to the file names here, and then for file and file names. And then we're setting it to the count words function up here, right? So there's count words here. So let's just take this from the top again in case that might have seemed a little confusing. But what we have is we have the first function, and I just want you to focus on this one because this is kind of what happens first, right? We have our two files here, and it's saying, and it's putting both of those files in its variable file name. Then it's saying for file and file names, and then we're calling another function, right? And this function is going to do this certain thing for each file. So we're working with multiple files here, and this other function is called count words file name. And it's going to try to open the file, and if it doesn't exist, it can prompt an error. Otherwise, if it does exist, it's going to count how many words are in that file, followed by the file name, and then the number of words. So if we put Control B here, we'll see that we run into an error. That was not intended, so let me fix this really quick. Okay, so I ran into some issues with my code. I had to like modify it a bit. Essentially, doing the same thing. Count words is going to try to open the file. If it doesn't, it's going to prompt an error. It's going to provide the length and the name of the file, which we see here. The name of the file, wonderland.txt, has about 32 words, and another text file, like.txt, has about 3 words. And so we have those two files here, for file and file name. It's going to count each one of those. It's going to call the function up here, count words, and then count word is going to do its thing and determine how many words are in the file. Now this is great, but what if one of these files maybe doesn't exist? Let's see what that looked like. So I'm just going to copy this and input this for the last one we did, just because it worked really well, and this one didn't. So let me try pasting that in there. There we go. All right, and we'll take this to see what that would look like if it errored out. So we're going to take 23 now, Just copy that over here, run it, and you can see that, well, these two files existed and it'll prompt the number of words in those files, but then it says, sorry, the file error please.txt doesn't exist. So that file doesn't exist. All right, great. Let's go ahead and move on to 24. Sometimes you want Python to fail silently. You tell Python to do nothing but pass, but continue to process, even if it runs into an error. Users won't be aware any error occurred, and here we will not see error please.txt like we did earlier because it didn't exist. So if we run this, you can see these two files. You see it's errored silently, so you can see except file not found error pass. And by specifying pass, it's saying to just error silently. Don't mention that there was an error. So, number 25. If you think someone will benefit from seeing error, include it. If they accept the program to work and the error is providing too much information, don't show it. So that's the rule of thumb for errors. All right, let's move on to 26 addition. And it looks like we have some input that's going to be needed here. We're creating a program that'll prompt for numeric input. Note some users will input letters, so we need to prompt them with an error that says we do not accept letters. So here we have an active poll set to true. While it's active, we're going to ask them for two numbers, and then the poll is going to be set to false. Then we're going to take the first number and the second, and we're going to add them to each other. We're also going to turn those data types into integers so that we can do some type of mathematical operations. We're going to put the total into the total variable, and if there's an error, it's going to say, sorry, ensure to enter two numbers, else it's going to print the total there. So if I go over to my PyCharm here, I should have additions, and I do. And I'm just going to run this, run that addition. Enter a number, and if you look down here, I'm going to enter 20. And enter a second number, I'm going to enter 20. And it says the total is 40, and that worked. Now we're going to run it again. We're going to enter 50 M, and sorry, ensure to enter two numbers. So that worked as expected. 26 complete. Let's go to 27, addition calculator. So we'll continue to run even if they're prompt for an error. So let's put this over here. Let's just take a look at the code. Set flag while true, prompt user to enter two numbers. Okay, they could enter Q to break out of it. So they no longer want to continue the program, they put Q. Otherwise, it's going to add those two numbers and same thing. Okay, so let me go to my calculator here. Okay, maybe I didn't make one of these. No worries, no worries. I'm just gonna copy this code. All right, let's go over here, paste it in here, run it. See if it runs nicely. Enter number 20. Enter second number R. Ensure to enter two numbers. And here you can see it says enter first number 20, enter second number R, and it didn't error out here and just prompt them with the error and then stop. It continues, so it's saying enter two numbers. Okay, and then they're gonna enter, oh, okay, I'm supposed to enter another number. Okay, 30. And enter another number, 40. And then it's gonna give you your total, and it's gonna continue. So it's not gonna stop, it's just gonna continue to go and continue to work. So that's great. Let's go ahead and move over to the next challenge, which was cats and dogs. So I'm just going to grab that, throw it over here. Cats. So make two files. One that'll store the name of 3 cats. Another one that'll store the name of 3 dogs. And we'll write a program that will read these files and print the contents to the screen. So we have a function here, def print this, function name print this, and it's going to try to open up a file. It's going to read through the lines of the file. It's going to put the contents of whatever's in that file in the contents variable. For line and lines, for each line we will read in the file. We're going to add it to the contents variable. So again, we're moving whatever's in that file to the contents variables. Otherwise, we're going to prompt an error. And then we're going to print the contents of that file. So here we have 2 files here, for file and file name. So for both of these files, print the file name and then the contents of that file. So I'm going to go ahead and run this here. So for the cats, we have a cat named Lion, a little troublemaker, and evil Lion. And then for the dogs, we have Maverick, Master Chief, and Little Spartan. I don't know, I just came up with these names. But it did what we wanted it to do. Okay, common words from Cyber and Justice Holmes book. So I just grabbed the book from the internet. And then what we're going to do is we're going to take the contents of it. We're then going to total up the number of words in the file. We're going to count the total words in the file. Or actually, we're going to count the number of words. Yeah. Or I think that's supposed to be letters, actually. Number of letters. And then the total number of lines, so however many lines there are in it, and the total count of words for the file. Okay. So if we press Control B, you'll see it actually prints out the whole file. So what's in it, right? I just took some text off the internet. You don't need to pull this off of the specific book I found, which is cyberjusticeholmes.txt. You could literally find this. You could Google random paragraph and just put that in a text document, and we'll work with it. And it's saying the total number of it should be letters. I don't know why. The total number of texts in file. So actually, yeah, okay, so that's kind of correct. So the total number of text in the file is 334. Total number of lines in the file is 23. So there's 23 lines in that file. The total number of words, of actual like words in it, was 32. Okay. So well, let's see what's going on here, right? So I like to start off down here. So file, these 2 files, or actually it's just one file. For file and file names, print file name. So we want to see what file we're working with. If I scroll all the way to the top, you can see it's the Cyber and Justice Holmes text. And then after that, it's going to print this. It's going to call the function print this. That'll perform the try, except, else. So print this will try to open the file, take its contents, add the contents to a variable. Else it will pass an error, or actually accept, it'll pass an error, and then else it'll print the contents to the screen. So that's what we're seeing here. That's what it's doing here. New line, so it's not just, it's printing out the way that it's formatted in the text. Then use to count the number of words. So we're going to use content.split to count the number of words, and or the amount of text, I believe, yeah. So that's the amount of text, not exactly words. Let me change that wording there. Text. Length, it's gonna count the length of the file, and it's gonna look for the common word the. So actually I have that wrong, I'm sorry. So it's looking for the variable the common words. So we're specifying, hey, how many times does the appear in this like page? And what we have to do is we have to take the contents and then send it to the dot lower method, because we want to count for uppercase does and lowercase does. So uppercase the and lowercase the are the same does, right? So what we have to do is we have to take all the text in the file and lowercase it. Okay, so we don't have any uppercases. Then we're going to check how many thes are in the file. So then it's going to count the common word, which is the, and what we're going to do then is the number of words in file. So we're showing the length, the number of lines, and then the total count of the word the in the file was, and then however many times the appeared in the file. So if I scroll down here, I'm sorry I was a little confused at first because I thought this was something else that we're working on here. But yeah, I mean the number of words in the text file, 334, total number of lines, 23, the total count of the word the in the text file was 32 times. So it appeared 32 times within this text file. Okay, this is something that you see a lot, you know, in the Word, Microsoft Word. It'll show you how many words are in there, the length. It'll, if you want to see how many times a certain character appears, you can see that. Well, this is kind of how it does it in the back end, you know. So that was number 29. Next, we're going to be working with JSON data. So let's take this. I'm going to put this in here. Here we will dump the contents of the number list into the JSON file, and after we will load the numbers into memory and print the numbers. Doing this will allow us to save our work number list to the JSON file, which we can use later. In this case, we will load it, and right after we'll print the contents of the file, import JSON. So we have numbers, and we have this list of numbers. We have file that's just simply .json at the end, so it's a JSON file with open file name, and we have W for write in the object F. JSON dump numbers, so it's going to dump this list of numbers into this number.json file. Then we're going to open the file again, right? And we're going to read the file, and we're going to load whatever's in that file, so it should be this list that we just dumped, into memory, and then we're going to print that list to the screen. So if I run Control B, you'll see it has put these numbers in that JSON file, loaded it to memory, and then printed it to the screen like we see here. All right, that looks great. Look at the saving user generate data, and if I start, first we'll have a file that check our, okay. So here we're gonna ask for some input. We're gonna check if, or actually, they're gonna input their name, and then we're gonna store their name in a file called numbers.json. Okay, and then we'll say, we'll remember you when you come back. We're also using JSON dump to dump the name into that file. So let's go ahead and move over to PyCharm real quick. This one's supposed to be called user generated data. So user generated data, okay, so I have it here. Yep, and so import JSON, so we're utilizing JSON, so input your name, store it in the name.json, open the file, write to the file, dump the name in there, and then just tell them we'll remember your name because we've now essentially logged their name at that point. So we'll go ahead and run this. So then I'm down here, it's asking for your name. Dan the Tech. We'll remember you when you come back, Dan the Tech. Great. All right, great stuff. And next, let's look at 31. Let me take that. Or actually, we just looked at 31, right? We're just loading our name in there. Okay, so let's look at 32. Looks at a file to see if the user has signed in before. So yeah, this is going to be a good one. Explain it. Import JSON file, the path of the JSON file with open file as file. It's going to load the contents of the JSON, and if there's something in there, it's going to say welcome back and then your name. So actually, if I run this, welcome back Dan the Tech. There. right? Now, what if there is no name in that JSON file, right? It should have something else occur. So let's work on that. Okay. So load the username if the user has been stored previously. Otherwise, prompt user name and store it. So if there's a JSON file, it'll prompt them with their name saying hello. Otherwise, it will ask them for their name, so then it could then input that into our log, basically, username.json. So let me go ahead and go to PyCharm because we're gonna have some input here. We're gonna then run this user data 2. Welcome back down to tech. So you can see here it has my inputted data down the tech. So I don't have to enter a name, but if there wasn't anything in the JSON file, then it would. See, so my JSON file is here. That's my JSON file. Okay. All right, 34. We are almost done. I don't think there's much more left. So let's see, 34. Combining both functions. So here we'll load the username if it has been stored previously. Otherwise, we'll prompt the user to store it. And it's essentially the same thing except using try to open the file. Otherwise, accept what is your name, and then storing their name to the next time they return. Else, if it was able to open a file and there was something in it, it'll say welcome back and then their name. So I don't think, well, you do need to use PyCharm in the case that you don't have that interaction, right? So let's utilize PyCharm for this part. So user try accept, okay, this one should be it right here. No, that's not it. Combine. Ah, here it is. All right, so I'm gonna run that. You can see it. It remember my name down. That's it. But if your name isn't in there, it'll prompt you, and you can just enter your name. Okay. So that worked out as intended. Let's go over to number 35. Refactoring. Basically breaking up the code so it's easier to read. And so, earlier we didn't really use functions. Now we're going to use functions to just break up the code and make it easier to read. So here's the code before we refactor it. You can see no functions. It's just got straight up a try, catch, else statements. And then we run, actually it does have a function, but it only has one function, right? Greet users, that's it. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna make 2 or 3 functions from that. So go to PyCharm, refactoring, greeting, start refactoring, check if the user's name is stored in a JSON file. So this first part is going to check to see if the file actually exists. And if it does, then it's going to return the username of that within that file. Otherwise, it's going to, so that's one function. So we have one function here, greet user. This is the first one. It's going to check to see if the name is actually in the JSON file here. So it's going to call another function, get stored user. Get stored user will then check to see if the name is in the file, and if it is, then it will return it. Okay. So it checks, see if it's in the file. If it's not, then the else is going to trigger and it's going to ask them for their name. It's going to store their name. Otherwise, it's going to run the if statement. It's going to say welcome back and then their name, right? And then we call this first function, greet user, which will initiate the whole process. So let's move over here. Refactory greeting. Okay, here it is. All right, and then here's my code. I'm gonna run it. Welcome back down the tech. So it worked just as expected. And we have multiple functions there. And we're gonna refactor it further. Refactoring. So that was one example. And the second example, we have actually 3 functions. So the first one, and let's just look at the first ones. It's going to call greet user. Greet user will then check to see if the name is stored in the JSON file. So the get stored username function will be triggered here. It will then check to see if there's something in the file, and if there is a name, it's going to return the name. Okay. And next, it's going to print that name out. Otherwise, we have to create a new user because their name's not in the file. So it will call the get new user function, and the get new user function will then prompt the user for their name and store their name in the file and return get stored username. Get stored username will then store it in the file. Okay, so we broke it up into 3 individual functions. Let's check it out. Yeah, it remembers my name there. So that worked out. Number 37, change favorite number. All right, so let's copy this code, and this is second to last code we're gonna have to run. Grab that real quick. So here we're gonna ask them for their favorite number, and then we're gonna take that input, dump it to the numbers file, and we're gonna say, we'll remember your favorite number, else print your favorite number is. So if there is a number stored in there, it's just gonna print whatever number they inputted. So if we go here to favorite number, and you can see I have some code already in there. Let me move over to the next challenge, because the next challenge is that asking for their name? Oh, that's asking for their name. So this one's for the numbers. Okay, gotcha. So let me see if I actually have that in here. If not, it's okay. I'll just copy this code, and I think that's what I'm gonna copy it, paste it in here, run it. Favorite number is 20. So I had a number stored in there, so it's just gonna prompt 20, right? Def greet user user number. So it tries to open the file, load the number if it's in there into memory, and return it as a number. And then if not, I'll ask them for their number, their favorite number, and then dump that number in the numbers file and say, we will remember your favorite number is. If they have a number in there, it's just going to print that number. So again, that's basically what it's doing. Number 38, which is the last one. I'm just going to paste that in here. This is a different challenge. So this one's checking to see if a user exists. So we have multiple functions here. And we're also asking them if their name is correct. So first thing we're going to do is def greet user function. If username is your username, so we're asking, we're having them verify if their username is correct. And if they respond yes, then we say welcome back. If they respond no, then we send them to another function that will have them input a username here. So we'll ask, what is your name? So we get your username, and then we store that in the JSON file, right? So we just dump that username in the file, use JSON file, and then we return the username so that we can run this else, which will say, we'll remember you when you come back, right? And that's essentially what it does. Now, in the case they do have a username, then you wouldn't have to create a new user, right? It would just get the username that's stored within this get stored username method. So it'll try that first, right? And that's the name that it will prompt them with, whatever's stored in the file get stored username function. So the temp numbers.json. And it's just asking them if that username is correct. And if it is, great. If not, it's going to have them create a username. So we're just pointing them to the function that will help them create a new username. So again, just reiterating on what it's doing so that you understand. So let me run it. This one's supposed to be fave num challenge. So here's asking, is your username Dan the Tech? And put no. There you go. What is your name? I'll put James. Just random name. We'll remember you when you come back, James. See, that's basically all it does. So if the name wasn't correct, it'll get the name correct, right? So that's it, guys. That's chapter 10. And next we're going to be working on checking your code, chapter 11. And then after that, it's projects. And by the way, we're looking really great. Last I checked, we have like 96 or 7 subscribers. And I already told you guys, if we get 100, I'm going to work on a Linux video, right? Because for a lot of us trying to get into cybersecurity, we want to learn Python and Linux. If you know both of those, you're doing very well. So I'm looking forward to that. We're only a few subscribers away, so if you haven't already, please subscribe. And thank you for watching. Hope you have a good day. Bye-bye.